The opposition fails to refute many points I made in my speech. First, the opposition states its definition of prison, which is all of the facilities where all those convicted of a crime or awaiting trial are held, is what needs to be abolished. He says that my definition of reform fails because my definition of prison identifies prisons that provide the reforms that I supposedly stated already occurring, such as healthcare and education. I define prisons as a physical facility where individuals convicted of committing federal offenses are kept away from the public while still being provided with services like healthcare and education. The opposition states that our individual definitions are not the same because his definition does not include the services I stated, because only a fraction of prisons actually provide these services. Federal prisons in the U.S. mandate services such as healthcare, religious programs, education programs, and the like. Versions of healthcare and other services are provided to inmates in all types of prisons, as not doing so is a violation of the Eighth Amendment, falling under cruel and unusual punishment. He states that his New York Times article says that if prisons actually provided these services, crimes would drop, but they don't, which is why there's lack of recidivism. Examining stats from the Bureau of Justice show that crime rates are dropping. However, incarceration rates have rocketed sky high over the years. The two are not mutually exclusive, which leads me to the vital point as to why the targeting of minorities are relevant to the abolishment of prisons. He states that policies that target minorities are not relevant to the topic of abolishing prisons. If we are addressing reasons why prisons should or shouldn't be abolished, then we cannot ignore the fact that the majority of inmates in the U.S. are of Black and Hispanic background, hence why targeting minorities equates to inhumane treatment of these people in the facility themselves. The reforms that I state must occur do not pertain to the services provided. As I mentioned, prisons should remain to keep only the most violent and unchangeable inmates imprisoned. It is a well-known fact that prisoners are subjected to daily violence and abuse that is inflicted upon them by their fellow inmates and officers within the prison. This occurs despite if an individual is wrongly convicted or has committed offenses that do not hold a gravity as some of the most serious offenses such as murder and rape. The wrongful conviction of minorities is essentially the definition of what it is to be convicted. The NAACP states that if African Americans and Hispanics were incarcerated at the same rates of whites, today's prison and jail populations would decline by approximately 50%. This is a sort of reform that needs to occur to address and rehab the issues where violence stems from, which is often from the most unstable inmates and even prison officers themselves. He says that prison abolition and reform of policies can both occur, but fails to provide evidence as to how. He throws around idealistic theories about how locked, safe, and secure communities will magically reduce crime. However you want to sugarcoat it, these communities would still essentially be prisons. Because he does not give any definitive explanation or idea of how policies can be reformed so they don't target minorities, which is the foundation of why prisons should be abolished for my case, he should not be given the opportunity to address it again with any new points in his closing speech. The proposition wants to use Sweden's legislative body to enforce his idea of what the decision should be. Sweden does not face the same problems that the U.S. does in the systematic imprisonment and abuse of minorities. The majority of their population is in fact Swedish. The U.S. is home to 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners. Sweden's legislation has no experience or jurisdiction in making any decisions on an issue of this gravity. The proposition puts a lot of effort into trying to explain why his definition of house, which sets up a premise that leaves the debate one-sided, demonstrates his disregard for injustice. The proposition's lack of concern for what is fair is exactly why I should win. He has no regard for the fate of others, and this sort of thinking is what perpetuates the systematic abuse that is faced by Black and Hispanic Americans. These people cannot argue their case properly in court either because they cannot afford the same legal services that many non-minorities can. But it doesn't matter to my opponent because fairness is not necessary. My entire argument remains on topic because it discusses the main reason for prison abolition, which is to avoid wrongful conviction, which in turn means to stop targeting minorities since they make up the most prison populations, thus leading to cycles of violence outside of prison that continue shoving these people inside violent facilities. Judge, at the end of this debate, you will vote for me because my arguments desire an America that does not thrive on the blood, sweat, and tears of people of color and desires to work for more realistic goals than that of anti-prisons, which, by the way, is still a prison. Thank you.